Discrimination of the highest
Discrimination.
order. Of the highest order.
This is discrimination. Everybody, you see what I'm showing you on the screen? I tell you right now, or take a screenshot so you can talk to the people in your workplace. We have to spread this. This is called economic discrimination. And then talking about about entrepreneurship. This government, Miss McClean, has stifled entrepreneurship like none other.
You are
Every turn.
correct. You are correct. You are correct. It is. I mean, as I just said to you, these things are connected. And I am glad you took the time to do this, because at the end of the day, it is beyond describing it as contradictions, because we've talked about community tourism, for example. We talk about creating opportunities, and we hear the Minister of Education with his buzzwords about, was it global citizens and whatever. I went, as you were speaking, and I looked, because I'm going to tie it in with what I'm going to say too. I went and I looked at what are tourists seeking on their holidays. Okay. Mm-hmm. Authentic. The first thing that came, key tourism motivations.
Yeah.
Because you start to analyze, you know, the look at different demographics. Authentic cultural immersion. You describe your experience in Tobago, right? That's what you were describing. Tourists want to live like locals, understand the local lifestyle, and participate in activities that reflect the culture, such as traditional festivals, cooking class. Remember the fish that you bought?
Yes.
Somebody probably could have taught you how to season it like the Tobagonians do. Interactions with local communities. And that's the kind of thing. Now, as you were talking about the fines, the $250,000 maximum, I had a vision in my mind of somebody having a piece of land, or in fact, I will use an actual case. I was in Trinidad earlier this year with a relative who went for medical treatment. And because you go for an extended, over a month, there's accommodation provided. And the person who facilitated her, they had moved out of their traditional neighborhood and created an Airbnb. So you were living in a community, like a typical average low middle income Trinidadian, with neighbors all around you and everything. They could have put you in a hotel or, whatever the case may be. But that was even in a situation like that. But what did that mean? It meant that a young Black woman, I was going to say like me, but I have to take off the young, a Black woman, young Black woman, basically was able to leverage her original family home, and I thought about it. People talk about the uniqueness of our chattel houses, right? Mm-hmm. The average chattel house will not cost $250,000. So if you and I were to invest in a couple of chattel houses, mm-hmm. and somebody decided that, told them we can go after them, they're not complying, we can bring down the law on them and give them all kind of citations and whatever. You can very well find yourself having a fine imposed using the maximum higher than the value of your property. And I could go on and on, Marcia. It tells me, and I listened to the minister, and as a friend of mine said, he talks nicely, but it was a lot of fluff. Similarly, I listened, I was on the road, and I in a sense, I probably wouldn't have gotten on though. I listened to Ambassador Commission talking about the impending introduction of free movement.
Yes, go
right. And he went all around the world and did not answer some basic questions, and my question to him, to the Minister of Tourism, to the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Finance, because we can't separate this tourism situation from what is planned for free movement, from what was promised to sugar workers, past mm-hmm. and present, in terms of an interest and a share in an industry, and the government has pulled back from it. But I will talk about that. What it is really saying to me, Marcia, as I sit down here and plan to talk about the pending free movement, the soon to be introduced thing, free movement of persons from some countries, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadine in the first instance, is that we have a massive cabinet, a large parliamentary group, 29 out of 30, plus the 12 senators who make up the other element of the parliamentary group, who seem to be out of touch, and that's being nice, or who are callous to the hilt in relation to what are the needs and the interests of the majority of people, the people who they will go out and call on to vote and keep them in office. Because when I listened to you just now, because the truth is, I had not had a chance. I wasn't aware that I hadn't checked the parliamentary the schedule for Parliament. So I only heard about that debate during the afternoon. I was busy doing something else. And so I had not got a chance to read the legislation before, because normally I pay attention to these things. And to listen to what was reported and to listen to, dissect it, makes me ask the question, is this administration serious about encouraging Airbnb? The truth is, I understand, and I've been sent some articles. I really have been busy the last few days with some personal matters and so on. So I have to go back and read it. But the truth is, there is an increasing level of demand for Airbnb. And, it takes me back to something else. You see, because all of these things are connected. In the 1980s, the credit union movement took off. 1983 saw the establishment of City of Bridgetown, Barbados Workers Union, Credit Union. The name of that has been changed now. The expansion of a number of credit unions, and the movement became very dynamic. Some people speak of concessions given by the former Prime Minister Tom Adams, but that came after the fact, because I was part of that movement. I am as I tell people, of the 70,000 or however members there are at City of Bridgetown, I am the 122nd member. And that was because, as I was told by my little brother, the names were put in alphabetical order. So I can tell you what happened there. And the commercial banks lobbied very hard to constrain the credit unions. And one example was, and I remember sitting next to the former and late Prime Minister Owen Arthur at the 15th anniversary of COB. So that's 83 and 93, 98, 1998. When I asked him, why is it that we cannot be allowed to issue checks? Because up to now, well, it doesn't matter now because we've gone to smart cards and so on. But up to now, the credit unions don't issue checks. And there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't. But you know what? It meant that people's ability to use the institutions would have been limited, particularly people who probably were interested in from a business ownership perspective. So when we look at all of these things and we come back now to Airbnb, it is not about regulation and standards. Yes, those things are important. But as I heard a spokesperson for a group, I think she said she represented about 100 persons. What she was saying is that in order to participate and be registered, there are certain standards that have to be met. Now, if government says, look, we want to ensure that there are standards, and they do this in relation to hotels and so on, these are the things that are required. But from the time you start hearing these ridiculous fines, think about it. And I call on the Vice Chancellor of the University, because he, as an economic historian, always used to talk about slavery and the restrictions.
Yes.
These are akin to the restrictions that, because, former enslaved persons were prevented from selling and being hawkers and huskers, whatever title we want to give them across the country. They were restricted. Now we talk about, as I say, community tourism, but you're saying, you know what? No, we're going to make it hard. And you showed not a single concession given,
Nothing.
but you are imposing all of these things.
If
Draconian.
Dave, can you put back put the last slide back up, Dave, since Miss McClean is still speaking on it. Thank you so much. Keep going, Miss McClean.
You know, so these are draconian measures. So it just takes me back. And you know what? I was talking to a friend, and the person made me write down a note because I had to agree with the guy. You know, he basically was asking the question, are these people who say that they represent the average Barbadian able to identify with the struggles of the average Barbadian? And I must say, and people will say we pick at the Prime Minister, but we got to pick at the Prime Minister because she's the head honcho. And furthermore, the vast majority of her cabinet, if not all of them, seem not to open their mouths unless they get permission. And so at the end of the day, it all points back to her. But I am asking the question, does she, given her and don't tell me you could talk it, but have you been able to walk it? Do you understand the struggles of the people you represent? Because at the end of the day, what we see is a situation where concessions are given. I have no difficulty with concessions, but I will say this, for years, and it applies on even the government that I was part of, hoteliers, the tourism sector has been the beneficiary of significant concessions. And I always remember having this discussion with a friend who always argued that the main weakness with that was that there was no quid pro quo. In other words, the hoteliers, the tourism sector, let me broaden it to that, would have been given these concessions, but there was nothing to say to them, because you have been given these concessions, you need to support other domestic sectors. For example, an area that we talk about the orange economy, we talk about the arts, people who are into music, and so on, plays, film, people who are into to craft. Do they spend any significant amount of their interior decorating budget to support artists? In terms of the entertainment, why have we seen a significant reduction in the support to the local musicians, etc.? So when we look at all of these things, taxpayers have been giving, because when a tax concession is given, it is a set of revenue foregone that would have been applied to providing services to the people, for example, who need to use the hospital.
Yes.
Who need to get school meals. So at the end of the day, what I am seeing, and I don't know who the advisors are, because to me, if you have such a large cabinet, and I always draw a large cabinet, but what goes on in cabinet is also shared, especially when it comes to legislation, with the parliamentary group, which is almost every member of parliament, save the leader of the opposition. So you're going to tell me 25 big hardback men and women sit down week after week and demonstrate their, not WEWK no, but their WEAK-ness, their weakness, that they don't question these things? But I want to link it now because I don't know how much time.
Miss McClean, you will take as much time as you need. This is important because I am trying to hold myself together here. Do you know I calculated Miss McClean and Barbadians? Listen to me now. Jamaica, Miss McClean, Jamaica rubbished their bill, and guess how much was their fine?
$2,000.
$6,000 US.
$6,000 US compared to a maximum of was it 250,000, 125,000 US.
Yes, and Jamaica ensured that it did not. That bill dead. It dead.
Marcia, well, I hope that this one dies, because if it doesn't die, it is killing what has become a very dynamic part of our tourism sector. And it is frightening that these people, it is ironic because here you are telling me tourism is the mainstay of the economy. The reality under this administration, they have allowed agriculture, irrespective of what Minister Indarware says, because he talks a lot. But I would tell him, spend some time and revisit what you talk. I wouldn't even bother to put a label to it because, like you, I try to hold it together in a different way. I try to keep my language as diplomatic as I can.
Oh, you don't want to say that he's telling a lot of
Talking
lies?
rubbish.
Continue.
Talking rubbish.
Rubbish.
Because no, it's rubbish. Because at the end of the day, I mean, here we no. Let me make a comparison. I heard him speaking of a technology to bring what I call it container agriculture production. There are these large container things which can cost you significant amount, at least $100,000 or more per unit. Now I know this because I have a nephew-in-law who discussed a couple of years ago investment in one of those things. And we came to the conclusion that it was madness. But more importantly, what the young man did was to design his own. Unfortunately for us here in Barbados, he traveled overseas, but fortunately for him, he did not abandon it. He continued it, and he still operates it now. So I would say to Minister Indarware, if you want to look at those freight farms, I think that's the title they call them, I can introduce you to a young engineer who has an interest in agriculture.
Yes.
And who designed his own system for a fraction of what you would pay to bring one of those things into Barbados. And in the process of doing that, he was able to design the computer software and whatever to run the system, and he set it up himself. It operates. I saw it in operation because I was overseas, and I stayed with him and my niece, and I was able to see it in operation. So and the point I'm making, you're not going to give a concession to a householder who decides, look, you know what? I have a basement apartment, or I have an apartment that, it doesn't have to be a basement. I have an apartment, or I have a standalone house. And rather than forego the opportunity to earn some foreign exchange, which is another important issue, I'm going to fix it up and I'm going to make it available. Now, the truth is, if visitors and as customers are so open to sharing their experiences, that they would come and tell you, look, I went to Barbados and I stayed in a property owned by Maxine, McClean, or Marcia Weeks, and I don't recommend it to you for these reasons. The rooms were hot, the bed linens were old, the bathroom facilities needed cleaning. So in other words, you get those evaluations done and they share them. And as I say, to register. So I ask the question, are you really seeking to ensure standards and uniformity, or are you looking to kill a sector? And in whose interest are you doing it? And I will say this, Marcia, because it also took me back to just before World Cup in 2007. And I didn't have a chance to look at it because I would look and find it and share it with you. Because I remember one of my brothers at the time was assisting some people. People went to the credit union to borrow money to fix up because, they promised the world. The former Minister of Tourism can tell you about it because I recall hearing his voice speaking about it. That's Mr. Lynch. And they were promising people, you can do an extension because we're going to have this bumper visits. And people went and borrowed money and they did not get the kind of support. So in other words, they expense themselves, and I'm seeing a repetition of that. And then you know, this is serious. And on top of that, you ask yourself, I know that some people do that because really and truly, they cannot find jobs. You know, they cannot find jobs, and therefore they decide, look, I am home, rather than my son or daughter just sit home and so on. We can fix part of this house, or, you know, fix up the grandmother's property. And then instead of having to hire a housekeeper, the son or daughter or the mother will become that, so that they then create out of the experience, you know, some situation. And couple that now, because I see what's on there. No, you will not contact me, John, but I remember him having a solution for everything when he was not in government. So Marcia, tie that now to the situation where you're probably going to push some people out of what I would call self-employment or revenue enhancement, you know, income enhancement, by having an Airbnb, losing that because government says you don't qualify, you're not going to get a license, and you dare not operate because you can't afford to be fined the kind of fines that they have identified. So we have now the question of 11 days away, let's say, influx of non-nationals into Barbados, October 1st. To be honest, in the immediate future, I am not overly concerned about the influx in this, because I want to say this, that when we talk about free movement, we are talking about 4 countries. And I think, Marcia, we need, and what I would say, and my comments are introductory because this to me is a heavy topic, and I will come back to you. I started a PowerPoint presentation, but I thought that I would put some issues on the table and we have to dissect them. We have to dive into them. But the point I'm making is that when we talk about free movement as is proposed for October the 1st, we have to recognize that there is already continuous movement of CARICOM and non-CARICOM citizens in and out of Barbados. Right now, you were talking about the challenges in relation to tourism, where people have sought to create employment for themselves. A related sector to tourism is construction, and we are seeing up on Saturday morning, but more so on Friday morning. You know my routine. I go to the beach on mornings, and I happened to go to Brandon's Beach, where I saw the construction of, I think it's a 4 or 5 story condominium complex. And there is a second one being constructed right now. I think that may be six stories or something like that. That's subject to correction. But every morning that I go to the beach, I see a number of workers, and more, they are predominantly non-Barbadian, non-Black. I see Hispanic, Latin Americans, whether they are Central or South Americans. I understand some of them come from Colombia. I personally got a call about trying to assist some Cubans. I don't know if they're Cubans who were recruited in Colombia or whatever. Not on that property, but somewhere else, but in the same kind of construction and tourism related construction. And there are quite a number of non-Barbadians I've heard. You know, Blacks, no. So I talk about Hispanics and non-Black workers and so on. Now, I understand, and having sat in cabinet where there were plans for a number of projects, some of them still happening, some of them haven't started, almost completed, some of them still to be started. There was a projection that there might have been a demand for labor outside, which could not be satisfied domestically. Fine. But what I am hearing now, complaints, because the truth is, for whatever reason, and I'll give you one of the reasons that's been shared with me, Barbadian workers are less attractive. And at the heart of that, outside people will say that they don't work as hard or whatever. Money. It seems to me, and I've spoken to people in the sector, the persons involved in construction seem to be focused on maximizing their profits in a way that pushes them to hire persons who are willing to work for like $40 US a day, I'm told that, and this gentleman I spoke to said that he had recently spoken to a Barbadian who was trying to find work and said, look, I do not think that I should be working, given the cost of living, etc., for less than $120 a day. And to me, I cannot fault that if you are performing, etc. But what we are seeing is a situation where people, I wonder to what extent it is exploitation of non-nationals. Because with all that we are seeing, my question is, where are they living? How are they eating? You know, what is the quality of life as they work here? Now, so that is happening. So those are migrant workers. If we come to CARICOM, because I'm trying to contextualize the planned introduction of free movement for those 4 countries coming in 2 weeks' time, about 2 weeks' time. Today is what, the 21st or 22nd? Yes. And so we're talking about less than 2 weeks. September is 30 days.
11 days. 11 days away.
Yeah, so it's 11 days.
11
so
days.
We're talking, well, you know, now what the hour is now, it's 10 days away.
Yeah.
Basically, you know. And so the question really is, what are the implications of this? Now, we are talking about four countries, three countries coming into Barbados. How do I know? Because there are Dominicans here. I don't know how many. There may be some Belizeans, maybe a very small number. I don't know. Vincentians, we have had Vincentians here in and out of Barbados for years. And when I previously called for, and certainly when I was Minister of Foreign Affairs and before that Minister responsible for immigration, it was something that I called for within the context of CARICOM, because people were saying they wanted to talk about free movement and they sought to you know, how I was looking for a word, they sought to criticize Barbados. But the one thing that I said I was prepared to do, because, you know, people talked about people being rejected and whatever. I said, everything has a context, and therefore the best way to do that, let me make sure, Marcia, that I just realized that my computer says that it is running low. Hold on.
Yes. Well, while you do that, Ms. McClean sorts out her computer. Folks, this is very, very serious. It's a very serious area that Ms. McClean is dealing with tonight. And again, if you've just joined us, we are looking at the free movement of CARICOM nationals. And asking how ready is Barbados, okay? This is a topic that we're going to be marching on Saturday. This is something we're going on the street about on Saturday. We need you to get out there. Get out there, not all talk, but action as well. Ms. McClean is back.
Yeah, thanks. I just had to plug it in and make sure that it didn't shut down on me. So what I was saying is that as we talk about this, we have arrangements currently where people are in Barbados. And my question is, as I was saying, when I was responsible, I said one of the important things to either prove or disprove a situation is to bring factual information. Mm-hmm. Now, I saw an article, and I'll go back. I didn't get to read it, but it was from the Organization of Migration, International Organization of Migration. And they were citing some statistics on the, because they have expressed some concerns. This is an institution, an agency, an international agency, which seeks to ensure that migrants' rights are protected while at the same time protecting the rights of countries, etc.